can see. Are we? Did you click it?
We're live.
It says scheduled. Oh, well, hey. Welcome to Tapped In, our magical, radical show about embodiment, creativity, and life after unraveling. I'm your co-host, Siobhan Dioris. I'm the founder of the Birth Realm and a co-founder of Soft Power, our cute little collective here, bringing our experiences and stories as just pan-Asian, queer, gender expansive, cosmic beings out here and inviting y'all to join us. So today we have our guest, well, we have a guest co-host, Willa Ace, as well as our guest, Isabel Bagsik, Unconventional Bliss. We got Highly Human, Unconventional Bliss, and they are two graphic designers, creative everythings. I won't even get into that yet. I'm going to first pass it to Midori to ring us all in. But welcome to the show. Settle in, get some hydration, get comfy. It's going to be a good time.
You are now tapped into the soft power frequency. And I am Midori. I am an artist alchemist. I am the founder of Art Alchemy Academy, an alternative art school. I am also a co-founder of Soft Power. I am the marketing fairy godmother. I have a background in creative marketing and business strategy, but my passion really is about supporting others to reclaim their artist identity and reclaim their creativity through the lens of embodiment. So I'm just so excited to introduce Willa, who is here. Let's go with Isabel first, and then we'll kick it off to Willa. So I would love to read Isabel's intro here as a little formal introduction. Isabel Bagsik, she, her, is a Filipina American creative who is energized by soulful conversations. After 10 plus years of space holding, event organizing, and designing across diverse industries, Isabel is crafting heart-led experiences and projects at the intersection of creativity and wellness. She is here to guide you towards remembering your inherent creative gifts from a place of rest and ease. Welcome, Isabel. Pew, pew, pew.
Hi. I'm excited to be here.
And Willa, do you want to do your intro?
I'm just here. I'm energy. I put divine booty hole. And I'm here for the ride, but also would love to get to know Isabel at a deeper level. I love what you're about. I was able to take a look at brown papaya and just see what I saw on the internet, and I just would love to connect. So thank you for having me, y'all.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here. So for those who don't know, a little background of how we met. Isabel, I launched the first round of what we call now the care immersion, but back then was embodied caregivers. And Isabel, that was our first introduction. I was so nervous putting out my first group container, kind of like you are right now, enrolling and just, listening and praying for the right people to find me, and you found me. That was our first touch point ever, and I will never forget how meaningful and special that was. I'm sure I called Midori right after and was like, oh my gosh, someone I've never met before just joined the container, and it felt so aligned and cool. And so I was reflecting on that today and thinking about where you're at. It's basically a year later. About that, it was last summer. And so later that year, Midori launched her own Art Alchemy Academy. Isabel joined there, and that was also another cute soft power moment where Midori and I were like, oh my gosh, we have a shared mentee, a shared person that we work with, and that it was so affirming. It made such an impact, I think, on our confidence to keep showing up. So I want to start from there. And as you know from being in both our containers, our favorite question is just, what are you celebrating right now?
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and just honored, just because y'all were my teachers not too long ago. So celebrating that, I hosted a workshop last week, and just kind of like what you were sharing, just felt the the excited energy from the group and just continued affirmation that I'm on the right path and that yeah, just preparing for my group program, my first one, and just getting invitations like this call is another celebration, to be honest. Like, I was so excited to dive further into conversation like this with people that I really admire and think their work is incredibly important for the collective. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I I think it's just so surreal. We hopped on this call a little early and I'm just looking at Isabel and I'm like, yeah, like you really have been in the field, like just a friend really and like community member since the inception point of soft power. Been a part of these conversations, been in Siobhan and I's group programs, and like you have been a part of building this vision of collective care and creativity, and in this like you've been a part of that like since because you've been a part of our lives. So I just think it's so special to like see maybe a little parasocially your journey, but feeling just so like full of gratitude that you have trusted, yeah, us to kind of guide, and also just seeing how like just by being in each other's lives, how much can come from that just by like being in relationship with each other, just by yeah, learning from each other. Like I'm learning a lot from you too, of seeing the way that you've been like showing up online and the way you've been sharing your gifts, and it's just like so reciprocal feeling. So yeah, I really want to get into maybe a little bit of your story. We usually start off with like this concept of unraveling and how that unraveling story can open up a lot, and really kind of jumpstart the healing journey. So I'm curious about how that has, if you have a story in mind, as well as just sharing a little bit more about like your journey to liberated creativity, I think is kind of what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. I feel like there's so many like moments of unraveling in my life. So I think like the most recent one that y'all have witnessed and held me through was when I was navigating the healthcare space last year, um, which started off with like an unknown diagnosis because one day I started feeling these really aggressive palpitations in my heart. So, um, and like one, moment of not trusting my body, of like, I think I can hold out for a couple days, see what happens. And just 2 days later, I tell myself, I think I should go to the ER, not even confidently, kind of like this, yeah, just this uncertainty of should I do this, even though it would be taking care of my body. And I did. And then eventually, after several tests and everything, there was no issue with my heart. Um, and really, after so many calls and so many tests, this cardiovascular consultant said that it was just a sign that something else is wrong in my body. And I find out after getting a pap smear, um, seeing my gynecologist, doing more tests, ultrasounds, that I had a cyst near my ovary. And this fear of like, what is going to happen? What is this? And I've never needed surgery before. And I found out that it is a common thing, unfortunately, but it is a common minor surgery, but I've never had surgery before. So that really scared me. And fortunately, it went well. I recovered well. And it was just a lot of this parallel to my own creativity, leadership, and voice, which I learned a lot from Siobhan, of this vocal vaginal connection of like energetically and physically, the those chords and the vaginal canal look the same and energetically are connected, and like really seeing how they were all a sign of like, okay, I need to step into my creative leadership and my voice. There's always so much uncertainty, this playing small, this looking to authority of permission or validation. And that affected my creative confidence in the workspace. And so, yeah, after recovering or during recovery, it was also an embodiment lesson of slowing down, of rest, forced rest. I realized that a lot of movement happens in the core or in the abdomen area, which I couldn't move too much. Um, and really receiving familial communal care of having my mom kind of wipe me down to bathe me, of my dad getting food for me, even though he had like a foot injury, but he was still driving to get me food, and my sister cooking for me. So it was such a deep, consolidated moment of receiving care and resting, and appreciation for my life. And there was a lot of like mortality reflection too beforehand. And after that, it was like, okay, or during all of that, there was a lot of thoughts of what are the projects or the things that I might not have birthed if this is it, which was super extreme to think about, but it was a thought that came up, and kind of a motivation of honoring my creative ideas and my gifts and my capabilities and my experience. That is evidence that I am capable, that I have done this before without training, without background. Like I jumped into projects, I jumped into a passion project, Brown Papaya, right after college, just out of curiosity and just to do. And it's funny because now that I've had that experience and more work experience, it's harder to tap into that again as easily because of the hit of on my creative confidence. Um, so yeah, it was a thing of like this promise to myself, slowing down, rest, but also like diving in deeply back to my creativity. That wow, my life essence is literally my creativity, or else my health is affected, um like physically, emotionally, mentally. So yeah, and then I recovered. It was around like October, November of last year. The surgery happened, and then several months later, I got laid off from my job. I was an art director at a marketing agency, and I was laid off this April. Um, but I had done a lot of work internally and a lot of like preparation, um, for me to feel excited when they were telling me. I felt this sense of excitement when they said they were letting me go, even though I could see on their faces that they were like, they didn't want it to happen. Um, but it was a sign like, okay, I've been, this is it. This is a time to dive deep into my creativity and craft a new reality that I've only been dreaming about, and just writing down. But now this is a space like I feel I'm ready to actually step into it. Like I wasn't ready before. I had the resources, I had everything the same, but I wasn't ready. But now I am. So, and then that kind of opened up the gates of unconventional bliss and diving into entrepreneurship and soul business, and really taking a culmination of my experiences in design and marketing, space holding, um, all of that together into what I'm doing now, is really taking the things that I was doing on the side as a hobby, kind of like pushing it to the side and actually doing it, trying to do it full time and see what that looks like, and experimenting with that, seeing that it is possible and seeing that from um, other folks like with soft power, really doing that was just evidence that it is happening and that I can too. And so that's where I am now.
Wow. Taking a breath just for this journey. To hear you just describe your experience now, kind of like Midori said, a little now it's been fun to watch you parasocially because during that time, we were in more frequent contact, and I was so amazed at your like embracing and your just like trust in the universe. I think that's what I witnessed a lot. It's just like this beautiful faith of where you're being led, even though you were understandably so scared with surgery and losing your job. And so it's just really incredible to hear you so succinctly, like how you came out of it after watching you go through it. And I'm just thinking, like, wow, it just clicked for me, like creative rest, this program you're doing, like, it's just so embodied in your personal story. I'm always talking about the womb as both the literal and energetic creative center. And I remember thinking that, and I even actually remember for myself of questioning how much of that I should actually say to somebody who's going through that. And that was a moment for me to kind of like step into of my beliefs of how energetically and like physiologically connected things are, because the fear of saying that to someone who's going through a real medical thing and then being like, shut the fuck up. Like it's not a spiritual thing, like there are people like that like that it wouldn't be appropriate to bring in to point that out. That was like, like, hey, can I just ask what creatively has been going on with you? It's not as accepted in a wellness space. And so, yeah, I have a question, which is just what were those things as I don't think it's dramatic to be on your like proverbial deathbed, think those deathbed thoughts of what do I want to do in this life? Are there any that you feel comfortable sharing with us?
I mean, I don't think it was like specific projects or anything. I think it was along the lines of thinking about Brown Papaya Volume 2 is like in the middle of production, and it's been like stop and go, moving through a lot of my own internal things, different job transitions, and everything. But I've been able to move a lot further as I continue to release my own blocks. And so that's one. And then expanding on it and seeing how that could be taken across different states, maybe even in the Philippines. So that was like just how much farther that could be taken. Just because community work, like I get really energized by that, seeing the direct impact and seeing friendships created. I think like that was something that I witnessed before and I miss, especially with the start of the pandemic's isolation and everything. And another thing was like traveling more because I knew I was going to the Philippines. So I went to the Philippines this February, and just thinking about like all the unspoken things to family. And coincidentally, I was in a one-on-one coaching program earlier of last year, and one of our exercises together was writing my journal prompt was writing my obituary and letters to people that I wanted to say things to that I that yeah, like what would I say to them? And it's funny how that was an exercise at the beginning of the year, not knowing that that was a lot of work that I needed to feel kind of ready for my surgery. So yeah, I think just expanding on the projects and seeing how much farther I can go and all the missed connections and friendships and experiences that I might miss out on if I didn't claim my creative gifts in the way that they deserve to be.
I'm so curious about like bringing Willa's perspective about creativity, because I think Willa's a perfect co-guest, co-host for this, because Willa's been really sitting a lot with the concept of rest. And I want to provide more context to the audience about what Willa's gifts are. Willa is an amazing, I don't even know what to call it, dream activator and designer, and creates just really beautiful, I don't even say beautiful is not the right word, powerful, I think is the right word, graphics that really are transmissions for and downloads that they receive. And I'm just really curious about your thoughts on rest and creation and creativity at this time. And I think this is just a really cool nexus point for what's going on in your life too. So yeah, inviting Willa to speak on that.
I do want to say a lot of things that are coming up with this storytelling, and thank you, Isabel, for sharing your story. Like, I know there's more to it, but what you did share is so resonant right now because there is. So part of the things that I'm moving through currently is there's grief. Um, as recent of today, I'm not going to share too much, but I did find out a loved one had passed away not too long ago, and so being able to process that in a different way, where normally I would want to shut out input, is like I'm able to experience it differently. You know, like, and she came today as a monarch butterfly, so just understanding the different energies that are working with us. And this whole week I've been like so drawn to watching these documentaries about the universe, and yesterday's episode was about the sun and how it takes a million years for the photon to go from the core of the earth, the sun, to even to the outer edges. And then once it is escapes, once it goes through that violent million-year journey and it gets to the edge of the sun, it has to collaborate with the other energies, and then once they combine, it becomes a solar flare, and then photons are able to reach us in 8 minutes on Earth. So just imagining that photon's journey of struggle, of triumph, of all of that. There's a jet flying by the way, so I'm sorry if there's background noise. But and then that photon transforms into energy, and it becomes photosynthesis here, and also it can extend beyond the reaches of the galaxy. So how when I think of ease and rest, there's always this conflict, right? Because we're still living in a reality, this constructed reality that is based upon what we're doing, our productivity, what we need to create. And like hearing your story, Isabel, like, yeah, I hear that too. It's like that message, right? So when we're not taking care of ourselves, or when stuff just happens to our body, of course it's gonna come out, right? There's gonna be an action, right? Our bodies are always telling us something, but when we don't heed that call, it's just gonna make you stop. It's gonna stop you in your tracks, because this is all we got, y'all. This is our energy is contained in this body. And the challenge that I've been facing throughout since the big awakening that I had was like, what does ease and rest look for me outside of these systems? You know, like, and especially this month, it's been feeling like I don't need to produce more. I don't need to expand or do any of that. Like, for me, my calling is not to do that right now. For me, my calling is to really understand how my energy is in harmony with everything else. You know, like, how am I connecting with the abundance that is right here in my space, in my vessel? How do I connect with, like, I know we hear a lot about ayahuasca, we hear a lot about different modalities of like ketamine therapies and all that. And it's always like this question that's been looming in my mind is like, all that exists within our bodies too. Like, all that things that we seek externally that we think will help us and will actually does help us get to like another higher understanding, we can also cultivate that within. It's just a matter of like, how do we, or what's working for us, you know? And so anyways, the long story long, the long-winded answer to this, the rest and ease, is, yeah, just sitting with it, you know, like, and really just trusting that the more that I take care of myself, the more that I'm able to care for others. And it's like that thing that a lot of activists say already, like, we are too important. Like Mia Mingus, I remember them, I'm not sure about Mia Mingus's pronoun, but Mia said in a talk, was like, we are too important for the movement to not take care of ourselves. And like, self-care is actually being self-accountable to ourselves, you know? And so, yeah, that's what I think of when I think of ease and rest, is like, how are we taking care of ourselves? Like, when I talk to my older sister now, it's not like, how are you today? Or what you do, or what you eat? It's like, how did you care for yourself today? You know, what's bringing you nourishment? What is that? And that's what's been on my mind lately. So when I think of design, I'm rethinking my relationship to my output. Like, do I need to share everything? No, I don't. Do I need to, am I sharing for people to consume, or am I sharing for people to like really integrate and understand and connect to? Like, and I'm never going to be able to control how people do that, but I can control what I put out there. You know, I can give guidelines, I can give agreements to the work that I produce. Like, if you're receiving this, receive it. This is my intention for this, you know, like just providing more context. But I'm still thinking about that, you know, like my first instinct is to go on, you know, type it up, like whatever download I have, type it up, and then see how I can translate into visual. And that's how I taught myself to process. But I'm in this season of like reimagining that right now. Like, so yeah, that's what I got to say. But yeah, I wanted to ask you too, Isabel, about ease and rest. Like, how does ease and rest show up for you after those experiences, and like your relationship with ease and rest?
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I too resonate with so much of what you shared. And for me, I think it's really evaluating, or I think it's presence. What I've really come to realize for myself lately is being really aware with how my body feels in the moment. And when I am not paying attention, then something might go wrong. I mean, even recently, even though I'm practicing, or even though I'm like calling in folks to my first group container, last week I had my own breakdown of, and I put this in my newsletter for today, of like I think I was like, I had fallen off my meditation practice and my journaling practice, and I'm returning back to it. And that is what is helpful for me to start my day. Because before I would jump out of bed and then go open my computer to Slack to start my work day, and then like, you know, get ready and eat breakfast as I'm working and things like that. So really trying to shift how I start my day, set the tone for the day, but because I was off of that last week, or like a couple of weeks leading up to that, um, then I was pushing my lunches later in the day, and and working through that and really focused on the marketing and everything. Um, and that I started feeling shaky. Like, okay, I need to eat. And I haven't felt that way before, or at least in a long time. And then I had a doctor's appointment, and other thing, like all these little things bubbled up where I wasn't feeling good, and it was bubbling up. And I had the house to myself because I live with family. And I let myself release and cry. And it wasn't just a cry, I was crying for a long time, and I was wailing, and it really felt primal. And I haven't cried like that in years, and only that last time was my hormones were unbalanced. My my cycle is late still, and so that's another thing. My hormones are imbalanced. So again, like my body's telling me to pay attention, be present. But yeah, knowing that I can sit with whatever emotions arise and let it be released from my body, but also like going to my altar and seeking ancestral guidance. And as I was releasing, the message of like, why couldn't you cry was coming out of me too. So then that was coming out. So yeah, there's a lot of like ease and rest is something that I'm seeing not happening with my own mother. Um, so it's a lot of trying to grasp that for myself and trying to embody that, while also like having this tension with her of like wanting her to rest, because she works a physical labor job, um, and then like seeing how I can gently encourage small new ways for her to think about her rest. And sometimes I see things that work for her, and sometimes like I I don't have the patience, and I'm just like, why can't you rest? So yeah, it's a lot of like internal things, a lot of small activities that feel achievable depending on how I'm feeling, body presence, and also being so aware of like where this is coming from ancestrally in my line, culturally, and all of that.
Yo, thank you for sharing, Isabel. Yeah, I mean, I love the way that my friend Alex puts rest as a practice, because specifically for, bodies that all of us who have been impacted by capitalism, rest becomes something we need to actually practice in our daily lives. It's something that we get better at over time, and it takes a lot of like psychological deprogramming to allow ourselves to feel safety to rest, to actually set up the physical space to rest. So like the actual physicality of it, of like setting up a rest practice, is getting in a space where you feel safe, and then and even getting to that place of like, I need to carve out a certain period of time. It begins with um, even being time bound and being like, I only have 15 minutes, but this is going to be a deep rest. That's why I think it's so important that there's people like you who are dedicating to this work. Shout out to like Trisha Hershey and like all these people who have been really talking about this, these leaders who've been talking about the importance of rest in movement work, in creative work, to not only like open that conversation up, but also give like real practices for people to integrate this into their lives, because it's not easy. It sounds like it is, but then when you actually start practicing rest, you notice so much come up. So I'm really curious about your program and how you're kind of thinking about what that process is. And I know you have a little bit of a framework there, or you do have a framework there. So curious to hear about your program and if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. I am taking a lot of my learnings from so many different people and just really seeing how that could be crafted in this group container, more focused on how it really is a huge practice or a huge component to creativity. Because I've moved from burnout. I know what that feels like, and how I've halted, let's say, brown papaya for so long, because not knowing how to balance my own self and take care of my own self, because my output was like um nonstop and just being on all the time. So I think like what I wanted to do in really crafting this group experience was moving from releasing, play, and embodiment. So over 6 weeks, we go focus on different things to be able to move through this journey, that hopefully feels achievable, not overwhelming, that feels like possible, but also easeful as well. And so, week one, I really want to start off with like the intention setting and clarifying visions for everyone so that they have that North Star to guide themselves back to what they want to work on throughout the program, through the group. Week two is really focused on rest practices and really feeling into that and embodying what that looks like. And then week three is inner child work and shadow work, just being able to remember what creating for the sake of creating was like before, and returning to that sense of play. Week four is about returning to that vision that they set for themselves at the beginning and connecting with their most expressive self, and really expanding on that vision now that they've gone through several weeks of focusing on this, working through this together as a group. And then week five is on their creative devotions and getting into actual creative play, and getting it embodied and feeling it in their body. Because sometimes, or at least for me, a lot of the times, it's a lot of in my head work and not actually moving into the practice of it. And something that I was reading in a book about building a writing habit is that there's such a difference between writing for quality versus writing for, let's say, the goal of writing for 100 days straight, and you just show up and getting into that practice. And that feels less scary, but you're actually like doing the writing and getting into it. Or the notion of Morning Pages in The Artist Way by Julia Cameron, of just showing up to your journal, writing without a goal, except for the amount of like 3 pages a day, for example. And then week 6, we close with celebrations and affirmations with each other, just witnessing everyone's journeys to move through releasing their blocks and their fears or whatever that is, and seeing how much that they've moved through and released and transformed together. And aside from the group sessions, we start off with a visioning ceremony one-on-one to really hone in on that vision so that they can come in to share that with the group, and a closing ceremony one-on-one to really integrate and process everything. So yeah, that's what that group program called Unearthing Creative Wisdom is. And I'm so excited to be able to hold space for folks who do feel aligned to this, who feel ready to show up to their creative genius, especially for those who are uncertain or not sure with how to even start up a project or how to choose a project. I was through different one-on-ones and workshops that I've been holding the past couple months, seeing a lot of universal struggles and challenges that people have been facing, from burnout to job transitions to not knowing what to start first, to not being able to tap into or hear their intuition. Yeah, I think like I can see that there is a need for this space, and hopefully those who feel called to this space trust that yes inside of them to be able to join this space and hone and cultivate their creative potential and gifts within them. So I'm really excited, and I'm just grateful for learning from all of you, from all of your embodied creativity, sharing that with the community, because I think a lot of this work is being able to uplift other folks, to tap into their own medicine.
This is definitely the work. Go ahead, Willa, please.
I was gonna be like, there's a jet flying by, but I have a question follow up. Okay, so my friend put me onto this concept of like creative debt, and I'm not too sure of like who the originator is, but it's that concept of like, yeah, because we live in the society that really takes away creativity. The arts are being defunded, all of that, and we all are creative by nature, right? Like we have some sort of creativity or imagination, but it gets stifled by a lot of the way the system is designed. And so I love your program because you're allowing folks to, even if they say they're not creative, or they say that they're not a designer. Like we all are designer by some degree. It sounds like a space where people can really let down those constructs and those standards of what a designer is or creative is, and then you're welcoming them into like release that through all these different practices. Did I like capture that correctly? Is that kind of like the realm?
Yeah, yes. I think like this is for any type of creative, for those who are doing this in their day to day, who are hobbyists, who have passion projects, who are creatives in denial. It's really from any skill level, any background, even if you haven't even done something that you consider creative, or project yet. Like that's what I'm hoping to be able to hold space for, of how can we work on that together, to have that confidence to be able to move from a rested place so that you can continue moving in your creativity from a sustainable place, so that you're not burned out, because that is something that I've definitely moved through and seen from peers, and I think like a lot of it too is tapping into our intuition too, and embodiment, and um, all of that put together.
And then I had one more follow up real quick. I wanted to bring it back because I saw that you were from Pasay in the Philippines. I just wanted to ask, like, how does like our ancestral, I guess, guidance, or like our connection with the land, like inform your creativity, and also like the things that you've been kind of unearthing within yourself.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So yes, my parents come from two different cities in the Philippines. My dad is near Manila, or Pasay City, and then my mom is from Bicol, the province, a lot known for coconut dishes. And I think really learning from folks like, I believe Robin Wall Kimmerer, about of unbraiding sweetgrass um, and really seeing how we're all connected um, to each other, to the land that we're on. I think that's so important to be able to learn from nature and how they are so kind of like communal or like supporting each other. And I think that's really beautiful to learn about how, let's say, trees share nutrients to other trees that need it. There's a tree outside my window right now that I would connect with and just look out when I would be anxious or stressed before a work meeting. And also, especially during the height of the pandemic, of seeing its changes through the different seasons and connecting that with my own seasons of change, and knowing that it will come back to bloom. Having that certainty is really beautiful too. Um, and yeah, I think especially when I went back to the Philippines after almost 10 years this February, um, just witnessing, especially when I was in the province, um, and being in the water, being surrounded by so many coconut trees and grasses and animals, um, just like, wow, ancestrally, like what did that look like, being so in touch with the land, being able to be so connected with food, for example, nourishing your body, and our culture of sharing that with each other, being in fiestas or just even like daily meals with each other, and such a thing of like, did you eat yet? And really caring for each other in that way. I think there's so much to land, so much to food that is so embedded in how I move through my work, through the world, through relationships. Um, it's really beautiful to see what conversations can come up, let's say, for example, in sharing food, or seeing how we mirror nature and those relationships. So, a lot that I'm still processing and articulating for myself. And I really appreciate the question because I think I'll still think about this for the rest of the day. But yes, I think like nature is such a thing that I really want to integrate more and want to experiment with how I can integrate that more into my own work and spaces that I create.
Mm, I have one last question for you. It's just hearing you share the process and week by week and how embodied that is, that it just flows out of you. And now with Willa's question about connection with land, how can you let us in a little bit on your process of creating that curriculum in like co-creativity with your ancestors and any other energies that you work with? What has that been like as a creative, like a co-creative process?
Yeah. Um, I think for folks who know human design, I'm a generator, and like if I'm doing aligned work, then that's like something that really lights me up, and I'm like in the flow and will pump out things. I just need to be able to balance that with rest so that I don't burn out. So that's one thing. Like sometimes there have been nights where like an idea comes into my mind, but I'm like, oh, I don't want to turn on my phone, and then the light just like is too bright to type in and remember that idea. So sometimes I just like sleep it off, and then the idea leaves me, and I'm like, okay, well, that's gone. But yeah, I think like a lot of it is, also as a Gemini sun, like I am thirsty for knowledge and learning from so many different things that I just like allow all of that working subconsciously. I save some resources, and in that flow, when I am balancing myself with rest and showing up with time blocking, which you showed me, Siobhan, of like honoring time to create or honoring time to eat lunch. Like, okay, I have time reserved. So that is where I'll think about um, marketing or curriculum development, things like that. And actually, and I'm still figuring out my creative process. But when I was developing this curriculum, I had actually typed like everything out of like what the practices would be, what the focus was, like all in one day. I think I just pumped it out, and then I had to set it aside and not look at it. And I only returned to it after maybe a month or two, actually. When I was ready to piece it all together, I had come across like another resource of how to set up a service page or like my sales page. And I really moved through intentionally writing out the copy, the North Star, like it really broke it down. And I found that really helpful and supportive. And then I was able to bring the curriculum portion back into it. And then building out the website design. So I think like it's a mix of taking my design experience of breaking it down into steps of like, because sometimes before I would just jump into things without a process and just like tinker around. But I think now it feels more supportive of creating some sort of flow so that I have steps to check off and like not jump around, but be able to really dive deep into each part. So, for example, my copy, the writing that I put on my website for that group program in particular, usually I would just want to take that directly into Squarespace and design everything. But I think what really shifted and I can see was really helpful was like, okay, just focus on the doc. I worked on Notion and just worked on the writing part and really answering deeply of what the mission is or what the focus is and what like each part of it. And then would I take that into Squarespace to design around that with the brand identity already established for myself on my website. Yeah, and then go into the marketing side, which I also was taking my design background and marketing background into how I was creating that content and testing out what batch content creation is like and pre-scheduling that so I don't have to be on my phone every day, but like just do it all in one day, for example. Yeah, so that's how I've been operating for this program and still experimenting with what works and what doesn't. Yeah, so that's what I've been trying out.
I just love how your mind works. That it was so much more technical of an answer than I expected, and I appreciate it so much because I love having that insight from you as a designer. And I just want to also say what a testament I think that process of I'm like just what a powerful channel you are. Like that's what I see that as. Like those like nights where I just go all night and time doesn't exist and I create something that I'm like, whoa, it's like you really open a portal. I call it mad scientist mode, where you just like open this portal, everything flows through, and it really is combining that discipline and practice of like, okay, I got to come back to this eventually because that's how I don't come back to it as often as I would like to. So I'm going to implement some of what you just shared there because I'm a tinkerer for sure. Midori called me that before. So thank you, Isabel. I know that you are off to IG, but I'm going to pass it to Midori to anything lingering that you're thinking. But I just thank you so much for sharing all that.
Yeah, I just think how powerful design thinking and how having frameworks can be oppressive within a very controlled, rigid environment, or it can be supportive. And how I think everyone within soft power is really thinking about how do we create a new way of thinking about structure and process that is emergent, but also is supportive to have a pipeline, right? There is some need to have the banks of the river to hold the creative flow. And so I think it's just so cool to see, I see it in Willa, I see it in you, I see it in the agency that I work for with all the designers on the team. The way that design thinking really is kind of the new, I think that is the design thinking needs to be brought into organizing and nonprofit organizations because of how iterative it is. And it really essentially is talking about asking the right questions and like really like from the root, like we have to start. And it's like I think like I'm just drawing the line to like decolonization too. Like everything is built into, like, for example, architecture. The way things are, it's by design. From the root, from the questions they're asking, from the way that people are designing things from the get. When the mind is like colonized from the beginning, everything that you create from that perspective will impact every part of anything you create. And so I think that's why it's just so important to have designers like y'all in the conversation to bring that framework into the way that we think about everything else, into the art space, into organizing and activism, into any other industry, because I think y'all are going to be asking the questions and providing this new structure of like, what does that design process look like in a liberatory framework? So I'm really, really juiced for your program, because it seems like this is just what the collective needs right now, and you're just answering the call. And I really, really want to recommend anyone that is interested in unlocking their creativity through the lens of rest and embodiment and design thinking, and inner child work, and like uprooting, to really check out Isabel's work. And I'll let Siobhan kind of close it out, or have anybody else have any last thoughts, Isabel?
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you not just for this conversation, but for just showing up to your calling. And that has been my thought watching you share it was, wow, I'm so grateful, because sometimes I feel overwhelmed with all the things, this savior complex that can live in us, that we need to show up so that we can do these things and hold the space. And when I see you, when I see everyone here, I just feel so at peace, like, I could step back and rest, because I just have so much trust that there's so many beautiful things out there happening. So thanks for answering your call. We are Soft Power. We are here every Wednesday doing Tapped In with more conversations like this. And check out Soft Power TV. We've got a bunch of programming going all the time. Tomorrow, we've got the Fairy Goddess at 6 p.m. Pacific leading us in some play. So get on our email list, join our free virtual choir, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, y'all.